Paradigm 8. The kingdom is about the yes. All right, here's what I want to do. I'm going to teach you the covenant and kingdom triangles really quick. But before I do that, I just want to introduce the quick story of living for our identity rather than living from our identity. So the reality is that John the Baptist, he was the precursor to Jesus. He came to prepare the way, and then he baptized Jesus. And when Jesus came out of the water, having not done any ministry yet, it says that the clouds parted, a dove came down from the sky, and a voice from heaven said, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased." And so we're going to rely on that passage to sort of teach these covenant and kingdom triangles. If you look at the triangles on page 105 and 106, really you see the first one, which is the covenant triangle, the Father, identity, and obedience. So if you think like there was God and then Jesus came, and before Jesus did anything, he was God's son with whom he was well pleased, which tells us a really important fact. The Father is pleased in us, not because of what we do, but because of who we are. We, as his sons and his daughters, we are the pleasing thing. Like we get our identity, our sonship, our daughtership. We get that from our connection with the Father, from the fact that we are his, that we were created in his image. He finds full favor. He smiles fully over us simply because of our identity. It's from this place of identity that we have the security to walk in obedience. So because of who I am, I'm going to walk in step with my Father. And what happens is we tend to do this backwards. In lots of churches, in lots of communities, we're raised to obey so that we can become. We think if I just do this, then I can be this. If I just work this hard, if I just accomplish this, if I just don't do this, if I can just stop this, then I can be this. Well, we're walking the triangle backwards. We're actually removing grace from the situation. We're removing grace. It doesn't have anything to do with what I can't do. It has everything to do with what I can do. So when I do this, then I can become this. So the reason this doesn't work is because the gospel Jesus came because we can't do this. It's like there was no other way for us to fully walk in our identity as sons and daughters of the one true God. Like there was no way. They tried it all. God had to make a way. He sent his son to be the way. If there was a way for me to walk in the fullness of my identity out of simply my own will, then Jesus didn't actually have to die for me, which would make God cruel. Jesus had to die because there was no way for me to do this. There was no way for me to fully embrace my identity as his beloved, as his daughter, and walk forward in that place. I had to have Jesus. I had to have the grace. So grace allows me to be his daughter first. And from that place of grace, I then walk in the obedience. I then walk forward out of relationship into obedience. So if you do that and then you move over to 106 to the kingdom triangles, God is a father, but he's also a king. And so if he's a father and his father gives us identity, then his kinship, his kingship comes with authority. So in the story where Jesus and the disciples are walking into Caesarea Philippi, it's in Matthew 16, Jesus is talking about who's everybody saying I am. Like some say you're Elijah, some say you're a prophet. And he looks at them, who do you say that I am? And Peter, who's in Simon at the moment, he turns to them and says, well, you're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. And from that declaration, that Peter actually was able to see who Jesus was, Jesus then knew, okay, Peter, you're ready to hear who you are. He changes Simon's name to Peter, begins to tell him about his calling, his future. He hands him the keys to the kingdom of heaven and the authority to bring heaven to earth. And so because Peter recognized his identity, he was then able to receive his authority. And so the king gives authority to his sons and daughters. We have the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And because of that authority, when we walk forward in obedience, the power of the kingdom comes. So we don't have authority outside of our identity. Once we have our identity, we can recognize our authority. Once we walk in obedience, we can usher in the power that comes because we are sons and daughters of the one true King. So that's covenant and kingdom. You're going to read a little bit about this and talk about it in your huddle. But the biggest piece of it is When you recognize your sonship, when you recognize your daughtership, you're handed the keys. You literally in that moment are handed the keys to open the doors to bring heaven to earth in every situation. When you walk in obedience, the power of the Lord falls. The power of the Lord comes. When you obey, He will show up and He will show off, and you will be able to do the things that sons or daughters of the one true God have actually been told that they can do.